Hey everyone, you're listening and watching Rashkin Report. This is your host, Yuri Rashkin. I'm very excited that you're here with us. And once in a while on this channel, believe it or not, we speak English. And I think the reason to speak English today couldn't be more appropriate. Movie Navalny, based on the assassination attempt of Russia's opposition leader, Alexei Navalny, just premiered after movie festivals. It was premiered at Sundance, and now it had a big international screening, I suppose, on CNN. And so thought it was a nice opportunity to speak in English a little bit. So to help me speak English so I'm not doing this alone, I'm excited to have Vadim Astrakhan join us. Vadim is a regular contributor to this channel, but I'm also, I think those that know Vadim perhaps know him as interpreter, translator of songs by one of the most famous Soviet songwriters, Vladimir Vysotsky. And Vadim has translated that poetry and songs and performed them in English and does that regularly in New York area. So Vadim, welcome to the program.
Good to see you again, Yuri.
Good to see you as well. I guess let's start with your concerts, just to promote appropriately. Have you had, I've seen you on Facebook having concerts recently. Where did you perform?
I did several fundraisers for Ukraine. Most of them house concerts, just people hosting events to raise money and awareness for various Ukraine-related causes. But I'm also currently in the process of organizing a relatively large, well, relatively to my own history, benefit concert in New York in a restaurant called Russian Samovar on May 21st, where there will be 5 bands and several solo performers. All proceedings will go to Ukraine funds, such as Erasmus for Ukraine, I believe. So we're about to start rehearsing for it now with my band.
There you go. So we'll make sure that any information about the concert is included in the description to this video.
Okay.
Well, so let's take a look about the movie. I think this is an opportunity for us, two people that, I don't know, I've never met Navalny. Have you?
No, I have not.
Nope. So two people that were born in the former Soviet Union, never met Navalny, but we have opinions. And so let's share. What was your takeaway after watching the movie? What did you think?
I thought it was very well made, very well produced. Not a lot of things that I had not already known, because I followed the Navalny's assassination attempt, his recovery, his exposure of the murderers, his prank call to one of them, and his eventual return to Russia and subsequent imprisonment. But it was just, I was impressed with how well the film was produced. It was engaging. It was the pacing was done really well, and I was actually even impressed with some of the tougher questions that the filmmaker asked Navalny about his, shall we say, checkered history. I was impressed that he actually even followed down that path. But of course, Navalny's...
But it seems like asking Navalny about those things is almost like part of his greeting card. It's the other side of the greeting card. You have to like turn it over and go, oh yes, let me ask you about these things.
Yes, I mean, I was surprised, honestly, that he asked the question. It was not just a promotional video for Navalny. I mean, I have the utmost respect for his courage, Navalny's courage, commitment, dedication, and absolute heroism, like which we don't get to see very often. But I was also impressed with the fact that the filmmaker did his homework and was not afraid to pose challenging questions.
I think it's interesting because I don't believe we ever did hear from that assassin that Navalny was able to get on the phone and who like explained the whole operation to him. I don't think we ever seen or heard of that guy again.
That's right. Kudryavtsev, was it?
Oh yeah.
Yes, I think he. I mean, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe it is a good idea that he has not been in the public eye, but at the same time, there's been so much going on in the world since Navalny's poisoning that it's very hard to keep track of all the parties involved.
Oh, is that a time to head to the shelters in New
No,
York?
there's a fire station next to me, so fortunately, I'm not in the position as many people in Ukraine are, but the sound is, yeah, kind of scary sometimes.
Yeah, for
Used to it.
sure. Yeah, I have a. Yeah, go
What
ahead.
did you think of the film when you saw it first?
You know, it's interesting. Thank you for asking. I was pleased again. As I think I agree with you. Technically, I think it was done in a really professional, a good storytelling. They're telling a great story, and I was impressed with the depth. Like you kind of alluded to it by saying that he was asked some uncomfortable questions, but there was this one particular episode that struck me when he and his wife are wandering around Germany countryside, and he's recovering, after being in coma, and it's just terrible. And then he's walking around, and she wants to grab an apple from a tree, and he's explaining how that's such a Russian thing to do. And I thought, wow, that is such a level of awareness. I was enamored at that point, but he's not, how do I say? He is so good, such a good politician. You can't trust politicians. So we have to remain critical and vigilant. But on the other hand, he is kind of looking at a position of like almost Nelson Mandela type. We can touch on that later. So let's stay with the movie. And then I also was really impressed with Hristo Groziev, which is impossible not to be impressed with him. He comes across as just an amazing character, and the whole storyline about how he's spending all this money of his own to do this research, and his wife doesn't even know about it. And if she did, she would divorce him, but there's no way she's going to see this movie. Like, wow, that is, what cave is that where the Groziev family lives in? So that's, it was just interesting. And just the gamesmanship spirit of this, it's not, when you look at Russia, it's not a country where things are going to get changed with elections. So almost like trolling is raised to a new level of importance and significance, because being a troll may be the best thing you can do. And Navalny trolls his assassins so well. There's just a kind of a sense of fun to the film, even though it is about somebody being like attempted murder, and now he's in prison. So it's just a kind of a weird combination, but I'm really grateful that people have responded to it as well as they have.
That's correct. And in fact, it is a sense of humor that I think sets Navalny apart from almost all Russian politicians, at least traditionally. In fact, you may have heard that Zelensky has been opposed to Putin by virtue of being an exact opposite of him. His trickstery personality, his comedianship is a stark contrast to Putin's this ironclad, concrete, solid ball of rock persona, which has been the case with almost all Russian politicians since time immemorial. And Navalny's sense of humor makes him very human. And it's almost like this fight between the king and the joker, if you will. And of course, I mean, obviously, Navalny is a long way from becoming the president of Russia. But if he were the president of Russia, he would be one of a very, very, very small group of Russian rulers with a genuine sense of humor. And I really appreciate it. And of course, I have to comment on your admiration with Christo Groziev. He is one of my favorite people in the world at this point in time. Not only I think he's extremely good looking, but he's extremely brave, and that makes him almost akin to Navalny. But I mean, all the people in that room. Another one of my favorite women, people in the world is Maria Pevchik, Navalny's colleague. And again, I also think she's beautiful and extremely courageous. But the sheer amount of courage and bravery in that room, the taking on this leviathan of Russian government, the entire Russian system, of their trillions of dollars and thousands of rockets and tanks, is being fought with a handful of laptops. It's very impressive. I have the utmost respect, all respect in the world for both Christo Groziev and Maria Pevchik, but of course Navalny is on another level of courage. I mean, it's one thing to commit a brave act, like go into battle against an enemy's battalion by yourself, but it's a whole another level of courage to commit yourself into prison, to return to Russia knowing full well he will either be assassinated again or put in prison immediately. To me, that's a whole another level of conscience courage, which is very infrequent. And the fact that you mentioned Nelson Mandela, I wholeheartedly agree with. It's a very particular brand of heroism that doesn't come around very often.
Yeah, there we have already people asking, can the movie be viewed now? It sounds like if you didn't see it before, CNN played it live, and I think it's available on some of the platforms, but there's, I'm sure, pirated versions everywhere. But I'm not aware of actually where at this point you can. I think, yeah, I don't know if there's a recording of it that's being posted, but if the information is, we'll find it. As it becomes available, we'll add it to the description. So I don't know. I think right now you have to, just pay attention and watch it. But again, to Russian speakers, there may not be the same time, except for those kind of a small family pieces like the one scene I described in Germany, or the scene in the kitchen, where you have the main characters discussing strategy. Most of those things we've, I think, seen. But it's for the Western audience that this is, I think, so important and eye-opening as it, because Navalny has been a superstar of Russian YouTube for a while. And I don't know to what extent that affected his opinion of his own ability to cause people to stand up for their own rights, for him, for, something. Because Navalny's last movie expose on Putin was seen by 100 million people, well over, just some incredible number of people. But I guess being aware doesn't mean it's not the same thing as taking action.
Of course. Of course. But I mean, yeah, I absolutely admire Navalny. Of course, he is not perfect. And, if you show me a perfect politician, you have to synthesize him in a test tube first, which so far not many people have been able to do. None, in fact. But his personal courage, conviction, and commitment and heroism are absolutely extraordinary. So Plus, he has a respect of a lot of people whom I respect, like Christa Groziev, like Maria Pevchik, like Lyubov Sobol, like Mark Fagan. These are all the people, Kira Yarmysh, all the people that I respect. And if they respect a person like that, then, and they know him personally, obviously, then I'm inclined to trust their judgment, same as I trust my own evaluation virtually of his accomplishments. And to me, he is really the only alternative to Putin's regime, not to Putin personally, but to Putin's regime, because I'm sure if Putin were to be dethroned and replaced by another person just like him, nothing would change substantially. But Navalny is a challenge to the regime. He expects people to think critically. He encourages critical thinking in people. To me, that already goes against this system in Russia that I call the Strugatsky's Towers. If you remember the novel of the Strugatsky brothers with the towers that were engaged in relentless brainwashing of the people. Of course, now you don't even need the towers; you have your TV towers. But the fact that Navalny encourages critical thinking, to me, that's a great thing. And his personal example, like leading by example. I mean, what can be a greater example than the one he's been giving? So. Even if he is not perfect, I still respect him like I respect almost nobody else.
Why do you think that there's such critical view of him from Ukraine, from other places? Because I mean, there's a specific reason, which is he said about Crimea, we can't give Crimea back. It's not a sandwich, just like it, you don't give it back just like that. Do you think that is the only reason, or do you think that there's anything else? I mean, it's almost like over the number of years that Navalny has been in public's eye, which at this point, I don't know, 20 years, close to it, he has said so much on different things, like anybody who speaks publicly, and not everything he said has been the wisest thing ever said. And some of those things he regretted, taken back, explained. I mean, to me, that's normal. That's communication. I mean, that's, seems to be within reason, of course. But it's especially since he has no power. He's not a president of any country. He's a private individual expressing points of view at different points of his life, being held accountable as if there is a democracy, as if there is election. Do you think, I guess, let me rephrase the question. Do you think Ukrainians are Ukrainians perhaps are judging Navalny unfairly?
Well, first of all, let me address the famous sandwich quote. Not being able to know exactly what Navalny's thought process was at the moment, here's how I personally interpret it. And maybe he didn't mean it like that. Maybe I'm giving him too much of a benefit of a doubt. But at least that's the way it sounded to me. I will go ahead and agree with him, because I think when he said that Crimea is not a sandwich, he meant it's a complex issue. It's a pretty sizable region populated by different nationalities, ethnicities, which are legally, it was obviously part of Ukraine at that time. And of course, it was what Russia did was absolutely reprehensible. They simply, using the Russian term, рейдерский захват, they simply it was a highway robbery. But it's not a sandwich in the sense that it's a complex issue with many millions of people involved. And I think what Navalny implied was they need to actually choose their own fate. They need to choose the country they live in. As far as I know, and maybe I'm wrong, but it's been my feeling that the majority of people living in Crimea were not in a rush to go back to Ukraine, and I'm not in a rush to go back to Ukraine now. I mean, even if you compare the way Ukrainians are defending their land now with the way they quote unquote defended Crimea back then, I think the difference is pretty staggering. But the point is, it's a complex issue, and you cannot just draw maps. I mean, that would be like what Khrushchev did or what Yeltsin did. It needs to be actually investigated. And yes, when people will tell me that there is an international law, well, the international law is governed by two mutually exclusive principles: the principle of national self-determination and principle of territorial integrity. These two principles are mutually exclusive. Sometimes the territorial integrity wins, and that's when you have Scotland remaining in the United Kingdom and Catalonia remaining in Spain. Sometimes separatists win, and that's where you have South Sudan and Kosovo and all these other places that split. So it's a complex issue. That, to me, that was Navalny's point that he made. As far as
at the same time, it should be acknowledged that he's not running to be president, or never was running to be president of Ukraine.
Correct. No, absolutely. It was his opinion on the subject, and I think it's actually it is a defensible point. Let's put it this way. Saying that Crimea is ours, Krym nash, to me, that's not defensible. It would simply justify Russian aggression and blindly following Putin's fascist system. But to call Crimea not a sandwich, I mean, it is not a sandwich. So I actually would somewhat at this point.
What the big divide that I'm seeing, and I hear in what you just said, and this divide usually exists in Russian, so you're welcome for everybody listening and watching for us translating this conversation now into English. But there is a division between people who feel that everything is crystal clear and people who feel that things are not quite so one-sided. And it's a real kind of a almost linguistic, like when people start saying, well, not everything is one-sided, there's different ways. You go, no, everything is so crystal clear. And I think the Crimea situation is another example of such an issue where for some people it's a complicated issue, and for some people it's a crystal clear issue.
Well, from Ukrainian standpoint, everything is crystal clear, and you cannot judge them. They're being attacked, they're being bombed, they're being killed, murdered, raped, raided, pillaged, marauded, anything by a fascist, aggressive regime. So from their standpoint, they're absolutely right in their decision to view the world as black and white. I totally get it. There is not a person in the world who should be judging Ukrainians for not accepting, for being too harsh on Russians. Obviously, they hate Russians for a good reason. For anybody who's not Ukrainian, we have a bit more of a luxury to seek nuances and actually address the complexities of the issue, in my opinion. But I totally agree with you that Navalny spoke as a private citizen. He did not hold any official position. I mean, listen, even when an American president says, like Joe Biden was criticized for calling Putin a war criminal, even though everybody and their dog knows that Putin is a war criminal. But when you're president of the United States, that carries a certain more weight, and certain consequences are had when they call a president of another country.
Well, there's also a soapbox and a power. I mean, right, all of those things, when president of the United States says it, it's different.
Right. So when Navalny, not holding any official position, expressed his view of the Crimea incident as a complex issue, which is how I repeat, this is how I interpret his sandwich comment, I don't see much wrong with it. Now, Ukrainians, again, they're perfectly justified in hating all things Russian. If they don't make a difference between people who simply say no to war in Russian and people who are actually pushing the buttons to send rockets their ways, well, it's probably, who can judge them because they're being killed? You know, this is war for them. This is a war of survival. So to them, Navalny is just another Russian, like Putin, except.
Okay, go ahead. The except part I'm curious about. What's the except?
Well, except that he is in prison, and there is very little things that he can do. I mean, I'm sure even Ukrainians, not all of them hate those Russians who are actually stepping out to protest. And every protest that was held in Russia in the past 10 years involved Navalny in some capacity, except when he was in prison. And you can be critical of all Russians, but I don't think it's fair to criticize people who are actually in prison for resisting the regime.
You know, okay, I'm going to go really on a whim here and compare Navalny just internally, bear with me here, to Jesus Christ. I'll explain. I know it's a big comparison, but he in a way is taking on all the sins of Russian people and can't do anything about it.
This is not entirely, again, I don't think this is an indefensible position. It depends which branch of Christianity you're going with, but some people thought that Christ actually had some sins upon him, and he was not a perfect he was not a perfect being. So in that case, obviously, I think Navalny is more flawed than Jesus were. But this Russian idea that was promoted by Russian writers and philosophers, "пострадать за народ," right?
Suffer for the people.
To suffer
yes.
for the people. All those, the tradition of taking upon yourself this completely unsurmountable task, it is deeply rooted in Russian culture. It's still, I don't think it negates Navalny's personal courage. I don't think he's a masochist. I don't think.
No, this is where I'd like to, I guess, interrupt you for a second, because I'm thinking, okay, let's imagine that Navalny did what the sensible thing to do and would have stayed out in the West and continued his, journalistic work and human rights work and whatever work. And we see wonderful people who are doing this right now, such as Garry Kasparov and others who are crusading against the regime. But he would not be any close, it would in a way disqualify them from the leadership competition for the leadership position in Russia, because there's understanding that you must remain in Russia to remain viable in some way, because there's a kind of a cultural disconnect when you live behind the iron curtain. On the other, iron curtain kind of creates divisions and understandings and relatability. But also he would have been, like, I'm thinking historically, almost like Trotsky, who would have forever lived in fear for his life, and always, can he say, publish another article before somebody else gets to him? It's almost like, in a way, what's the use of that? If you want to think to the bigger level, then I think this was a much bigger decision on that level.
Well, I think had he chosen to remain in the West, he would be like Khodorkovsky, like Kasparov. They're respected public figures in exile. But I think this is a little bit against his character. He kind of wants to be in the thick of things, and if that involves going on a cross, that bringing up the Jesus comparison again, I think that was his conscious choice. He wants to. I don't know if he sees himself as a moral leader. I don't think he has a Leo Tolstoy or Alexander Solzhenitsyn thing in him. Certainly not on the literary level. but he is that kind of natural born hero.
So you see him going back to Russia as a more and being imprisoned almost voluntarily, is is expression of who he is as a person versus the strategic decision of his team, something like that.
Yes, he has people out. Pretty much, most of his team is already outside of Russia. They're carrying their work, and they will continue, hopefully, to continue their work. And again, those are the people I respect tremendously. But he is slightly different. It's I think it's a character thing. It's a character issue.
Cool. Well, some important things that we have kind of working through here. Let's see. Another thing, of course. Well, you know, if Navalny became Russian president, he would be just like Putin, only a little bit different, but mostly just like Putin, is what some people say. And I'm trying to figure out, how can that impression be created when Navalny has no KGB background, when they're like different people in every way? But the comparison is being made not because they're different or the same, but because Russian throne is the same. And power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And if the goal is to keep the country in the biggest landmass possible, then that automatically makes it an empire, and empires look for new lands. And so how do you square away? How can, you know, Navalny be, is he going to be different than Putin in a sense? He's not going to let all these other territories to like wander off into separatist freedom. It's a complicated situation. So, you know, that's a complicated situation, I suppose.
It is, and these are all legitimate concerns. In 500 years of Russian history, starting from Ivan III, Russia has been a dictatorship, an authoritarian vertical of power for pretty much the entire duration, with very short periods of relative freedom. Very short, and then usually ended up with a dictator, an authoritarian ruler, tightening the screws. So is it possible that Navalny is a Napoleon who, well, much taller though, as a much taller Napoleon who will become another Putin the minute he is handed the keys to Kremlin? Yes. Certainly, but at the same time.
All right, thanks for listening. It's been great. Okay, it's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, but at
the hero goes into the castle and happily becomes corrupted.
Well,
happy end. Okay.
Well, Yuri, you know the story of the dragon, right? You know, to kill the dragon, the dragon slayer becomes the dragon himself very, very shortly. And Navalny.
So Russian. Yes.
Even though that I think that fairy tale is pretty universal. I think that it came from Asia even. But is it possible? Yes, it is. But at the same time, he is really the only viable alternative, or I should say, his movement is the only viable alternative. Personally, not being deeply involved in Russian politics, I would love to see the next president of Russia a woman, either Lyubov Sobol or Maria Pevchikh or Kira Yarmysh.
Wait, but Putin has two daughters. What's the problem?
Well, I didn't say a princess. I said a president.
Okay.
But Navalny, through his undeniable heroism, would provide a moral high ground, and of course the energy and the drive and the sheer force needed to at least damage the regime some way. But of course, it is a viable concern that he claims, he's been claiming for years, that his goal is not to become a dictator, but to instill the democratic institutions in Russia, the independent courts, the free press, the parliament.
See, that's the thing about Navalny. He really says a lot of right things. Like, he may have said some not so right things, and there's a list, but he says a lot of really good, right, encouraging things.
Yes, and he says them in a very charismatic way, that the people listen to him. Is there a chance that he is another dragon slayer waiting to become a dragon? Yes, there is. There's nobody. Again, the entire 500 years of Russian history teaches us that it's really hard for a dragon slayer not to become a dragon. When they by chance do not become a dragon, then another dragon comes along and slays the slayer, kind of like with Kerensky, right? But at the same time, if he is really the only active alternative that I see, and there is always hope. But that kind of brings us to the first question that you asked me about why do Ukrainians hate Navalny. Well, if you saw the conversation between Lyubov Sobol and Alexei Arestovich not too long ago, it was a very good conversation. And Arestovich voiced basically all the same concerns that we're talking about now, saying that, how can we trust Navalny? How can we trust him not becoming the authoritarian leader? Well, the entire history of Russia teaches us that he will be just that. And any authoritarian leader, any strong authoritarian leader of Russia will be an enemy of Ukraine. And Sobol, to be honest, and this is an important point that I actually want to make. She really didn't have much to argue about. She didn't have a lot of ground to stand because historically Arestovich is correct. And Sobol spoke on this idealistic notion of, this new Russia, new democratic Russian government will not be a threat to its neighbors, which is fine, but it sounded very idealistic and not really rooted in history. But at the same time, she could not have said anything else. Because had she completely agreed with Arestovich, that would be admitting that her whole work is for naught, it's useless. And she just needs to, go into hiding again and just become an investment banker or a journalist or a musical critic somewhere in the West. But they don't want to give up their fight because to them it's a noble and a just and the right thing to do. So it was actually that interview almost made me sad in a sense that as much as I would love to agree with Sobol, Arestovich made a stronger point historically. Who will win? Time will tell, of course. And these are the historic events of historic importance that are a lot more fun to read about in history books than to live through them. But unfortunately, we're kind of caught in that right now. I hope this made sense.
They'll write books about us. So here's a question that we have a listener who is posing it in Russian, so I will translate it for the audience. Just to preface it, a regular listener who, not a fan of Navalny, who considers really most projects, such as Navalny, as he calls it, project, to be somehow Kremlin-driven. There is Kremlin hand behind everything. Otherwise, it couldn't exist. Like, in Russia, if anything grows, that means that government allowed it to grow. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to grow. So in that vein, Gennady writes, Navalny is not a hero, but a usual con man, acting as following the opposition scenario with the support of the worst wing of the Kremlin gang. He's one of the reasons for the war. And I think he actually disliked the stream now. So sorry, Gennady. How do you view this part of the conversation? Is this somebody's paranoia? Is this somebody's sad experience? Because with Putin, you can never think things too crazy, I guess. What do you think?
Well, this is I'm going to get real nasty here. And
Better than you, than me. Go ahead.
yes, and well, I mean, at one hand, it's easy to dismiss it as paranoia because the project of Kremlin was assassinated and then put in prison, and then voluntarily returned to be put in prison. I don't know if there's enough money in the world to find an agent capable of this kind of self-sacrifice. But also, there is, I think, a person who makes these allegations. There is something wrong with them morally, and here's what I mean. You know, it's not everybody can be a hero. I get it. We all have families, we all have our lives, and not everybody can be a hero. But it's in human nature, and probably the uglier side of human nature is try to dismiss heroes, discredit them, smear them with mud. If I cannot be a hero, well, this guy is no hero either. And to me, it's an absolutely ghastly human trait. Tearing down another person for being something you are not. This is so wherever or not Navalny is, again, we said it numerous times, Navalny is not perfect. There is an off chance that he will be just as bad as Putin. Chances are we will never know, but in the off chance, he did rub shoulders with some terrifying individuals and very bad people that I would not shake hands with. He is not perfect, but unquestionably he is a hero. Unquestionably, his personal courage and commitment is of the highest order, and tearing him down and discrediting him, to me, that tells more about the people who are doing the discrediting. Because it's basically saying that, you know, if I can, it's the same type of people who always seek for ulterior motives for donors or philanthropists. There's got to be something in it for them. A person cannot just give $1 million to charity. He must be writing it off the taxes. A person can never help somebody just out of, you know, goodness of their heart, or they don't believe in altruists because they themselves.
But it's interesting because once they find that justification, oh, they're doing it for their taxes, there's like a sense of peace that comes over them because they found the justification.
Absolutely, because that makes them sleep better at night. Like I said, I'm really getting nasty here, but I think it's people's own insecurities that prevent them from seeing greatness and ability of heart and ability of mind. I'm kind of quoting Pushkin here loosely, that they themselves do not possess. And I know for a fact that. Well, not for a fact, but I'm pretty sure that I would not be able to do what Navalny did. It takes a particular brand of heroism that, I mean, I could probably do it to protect my family or whatnot, but to go from peaceful and democratic Germany back into Russia with a particular target on your forehead, I don't think I could do it. And this is why I admire heroes. I don't try to knock them down or discredit them or smear them with mud.
Vadim, I'd like to ask you last question in this kind of summarizing our conversation. What do you think? Why should people watch this movie? It sounds like you would like them to watch this movie. Where, you know, people look at us and go, well, what do people from Russia think of Navalny? I think we explained reasonably well, although I will make a little announcement here that later this evening I'm going to have another stream with another friend of mine and regular contributor to this channel, Slava Malamud, who also has his different opinion, so you'll get different takes. Subscribe to Rashkin Report. And so should people watch this? Why should they watch this? What do you think they can get out of watching this? Closing words.
If you did not follow the Navalny story, then you will learn a lot because it's a well-produced, well-filmed movie. You will see a fascinating story of government assassinations and personal courage. If you did follow it, as I suspect most Russians and Russian speakers did, it's still a well-produced film that will help you maybe focus on details that you might have missed the first time around. This time, like for example, at the moment of the famous phone call, I was mostly concentrating on the facial expressions of Hrista Groziev and Maria Pevchik, which are absolutely priceless. I mean, the whole face.
I don't know that Hrista Groziev can play poker. I'm not sure. You know, he's just was so like showing how he could not believe. Yeah. I don't know.
I totally relate to him. Almost did the same thing as I was watching it. I cannot believe this is happening.
Right.
So again, this is a very big story, one of the biggest until the war, obviously. And even though now, obviously, a lot has happened since that movie was filmed and keeps happening, unfortunately. But it's still a fascinating real-life James Bond developments, and tale of brilliant, intelligent, game of intellect, brilliant investigation, coupled with personal courage of the highest sort.
Vadim, thank you so much for joining me today, and thanks to all of our listeners and viewers. You can subscribe, hit like, distribute this video in your social media platforms. One more thing, yes, Vadim,
yes.
what's up?
Just a reminder, on May 21st, if you're in the vicinity of New York, come to the place called Russian Samovar. It's a legendary Russian hotspot. It's been around for longer than the Russian Federation has. And where we will be playing a benefit concert for Ukraine. All the proceedings will go to Ukraine. There will be several bands, including my own. So it's Saturday, May 21st. We'll be happy.
I just might have to stop by. All right. Well, you're listening and watching Rashkin Report. This was Yuri Rashkin.